Hello, I'm Stan Stalnaker with Hub Culture, and we are at the World Climate Summit in Durban, South Africa, against the backdrop of COP17, the UN Summit on climate change. I'm with Sandrine Dixon-Decle, who is an old supporter of Hub and really a great friend of Hub Culture, with the Corporate Leaders Group on climate change from the Prince of Wales. Tell us about this organization, what the group is doing, and then let's talk a little bit about the big picture with regard to COP and climate.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Actually, the Prince of Wales Corporate Leaders Group on Climate Change is one of the leaders groups that sit under the umbrella of the Cambridge Program for Sustainability Leadership.
So this is University of Cambridge?
University of Cambridge. We are a department inside Cambridge, and we've been there for about 22 years, started by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. He basically wanted to ensure that there was a proper dialogue, really looking at how you embed sustainability and low carbon practices into business bottom line. So he was actually quite an innovator in those times because there wasn't a department in Cambridge that was actually looking at this.
And so this is sort of merging the educational fields, the business fields, and
Absolutely.
the sustainability fields into
Absolutely.
one practice.
Yeah, so we actually have three key areas that we try to focus on. One is the learning. So we run a series of executive programs in the area of sustainability. We also have a master's now in sustainability. We do tailor-made programs across the world. We've worked with the World Bank, we work with the European Commission, we work with the Asian Development Bank, a series of different banks, but also large corporations that want tailor-made programs. And then we have our own programs. And what's happened is that a lot of the executives that went through our programs said, well, now you've given us a voice and we feel that we need to take this leadership position. How can we do that? What's the best way to do that? So a series of them got together and started to bring together either sectors. So we have a banking environment initiative where we have key banks that are working together in the area of environment and sustainability. We have our Climate-Wise initiative, which is a leaders group which brings together key insurance companies from around the world. Our pension initiative, P8.
And are you finding you're getting faster activity and action when you're getting these kind of verticals moving?
Well, we've got about 4 or 5 verticals, and then we've got horizontal. So we've got two, the UK Corporate Leaders Group on Climate Change and the EU Corporate Leaders Group on Climate Change, which I actually run, which is multi-sectoral. So we found that in some sectors it was better to just look at the sectors and how they could work together, and then in others it was better to bring together different sectors to see how they can actually exchange knowledge but also become a progressive voice.
So it sounds pretty flexible.
It is pretty flexible. It very much depends on what the companies want, and some of them decide that they actually want to set up a new initiative. The only common denominator is the fact that they are progressive. So we do try, and we work as a secretariat throughout the Cambridge program to keep them edgy, to try to develop the right stories for both the climate space, and so make sure that we work in partnership with companies, but also with the governments. And we now actually have set up a platform here in South Africa of leaders run by Nedbank. We have one in Turkey that we've been working with. So we stimulate these platforms around the world as well. We have one in Japan, so now we have a leaders network, and then we link up.
Which is great.
So trying to continue to work together and also allow CEOs, most of them at the leaders level are CEOs, to talk to each other and to kind of exchange best practice.
So this raises a great question, which is in regard to COP and also the climate situation at large. It sounds like you guys have your ear on the ground to a lot of people and a lot of voices. What's bubbling up? What's the consensus that you're hearing from these communities about the process and about the progress or lack thereof?
So one of the initiatives that we actually run prior to every COP in the last 5 years has been our communiques. And what we do through that process, it's about a 6-month process, is we speak to all of the CEOs that we're working with. And we try to see what they want from an international framework deal. Do they still want one, or actually do they feel it's too late and we're not going to get anything? And interestingly, over the last 4 years, everyone was firmly behind an international framework deal. I think this year our communique is slightly different in the sense that most of the business community still supports an international framework deal and feels that it's absolutely imperative to have the clarity of that deal in order to make sound investment decisions and also know where we're going. But by the same token, they're actually calling on governments from around the world not to just count on an international framework deal to start doing anything in the building of a low carbon economy. Most of these companies have already invested in a low carbon economy. They
They're like-
feel that it's an opportunity,
Yeah.
and they don't want to just sit and wait
They're like, if
for
you're
an
late, we won't
international
wait.
framework deal. Exactly.
Right.
So we're now looking at a variety of different ways in which we can stimulate dialogue both at the government level, nationally, regionally, and of course locally.
Yeah, and subnational seems to be the
Yeah.
place where the activity is happening,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's, you look at cities, you look at mayors, this is where there seems to be perhaps more traction.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that you see in terms of the mayors and what the mayors are calling for are also very local oriented initiatives. And we've actually set up also a group of corporations that are working together in the area of schools. And what we've developed is a toolkit for schools to be able to actually measure their carbon footprint and then give them suggestions on how they can decrease the footprint.
So how do you get a hold of the toolkit?
So actually, we're in the process of developing it. It's going to become public. We're now entering into the second phase where we're going to have a series of demonstration sites across the EU, and then we hope to latch on to some possible partners in the US, Japan, and other regions as well. And it's more built on the living laboratory experiment. It's the fact that actually you allow young adults in schools to start to actually input the data into this toolkit and understand what their impact is, and then hopefully develop young leaders.
So it's
a
like
link
a
with the
double.
next
This
generation.
is like a double benefit, right?
Exactly.
So you're educating, and you're also
Exactly.
actually getting some really good information on, a
where
big
you
sector.
fit, you fit, and then solutions as to what you can do. Some of them very cost-effective energy efficiency solutions, changing your mobility patterns, because it's the whole system around the school, which means that it's coming back to your kind of local initiative.
Yeah.
We then work with local governments to see if they want to start to renovate some of these schools in a cost-effective way, give them solutions as to how to do that. It's a very exciting project with a lot of
big.
core
Sounds huge.
innovators. Well, it started off really small, and I think now the enthusiasm of the companies that are working with us means that it's just grown. And we call it the Atlas Project because we feel that we're helping support the globe.
Okay.
But by the same
and you
token,
use atlases in schools.
and you
or
use
they used
atlases
to.
in
I don't know if
schools.
they
I think they still do. I hope
It's
so.
like a Mac or something.
Exactly. And so we're actually now online, and we've created our own website. And the other thing, interestingly enough, is we launched it with Princess Laurentien of the Netherlands in a Dutch school that had actually, for the first time, had completely renovated its school in a sustainable way. And the director of the school was so excited, not only by the concept of the toolkit, because he's actually gone quite far, but he still wants to use it to benchmark himself, but also the fact that could we maybe set up a network, and I should talk to you about this. He wants to set up a network of principals across the globe behind low carbon solutions and start to exchange knowledge, best practice on how to do this. But also because they're teaching young adults and primary school and the whole, because we're not just looking at primary, we're looking from primary all the way to university. And this is all about a systems approach. It can be used in any school.
Yeah. And systems approaches, this is, I think, the one thing that may be I don't know, almost the saving grace of the failure from COP to get to anything, is that everybody else is now saying, well, if it's not going to happen at the governmental level, we have to work together to make it happen. And the only way that can really happen is through collective systems,
Yeah.
whether it's a network or a group of people
Yeah.
or a group like the Prince of Wales group.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts about the Durban and how you're finding it, sort of even speaking for the rest of these people that you're working with as part of your network?
I think I wish that we had built more on some of the successes in Cancun. I think that there's been a bit of a sentiment from the business community that the process leading to Durban has been slightly chaotic, both in terms of the exchange with business, which was set up actually by the Mexican government, but also
And it seemed like it was a big success.
And it worked very well.
Yeah.
But also building the bridges between North and South took a lot of work. Having worked myself with the Mexican ambassador to the EU, we talked a lot about how you can do that. Mexico was perfectly placed for that. I think it's a bit of a shame that we didn't build on that. There was a huge amount of effort.
An opportunity lost.
An opportunity lost. We're all extremely hopeful that something comes out of Durban.
Do you think the climate fund? There's a lot of talk about doing a climate fund. Do you think it'll make it through the goalpost?
I'm not sure because of the reaction I'm seeing from the U.S., from Russia as well, from Canada that seems to be blocking everything. I do think that RED will probably make more progress, and that's very
great.
important
Really
in the area
good.
of forestry.
Yeah.
I do think we still need to address technology transfer quite seriously, and also the finance side. And I don't think we're going to make a huge amount of progress if we don't do that. And then, of course, there's the ultimate question of Kyoto 2.
Yeah.
And whether or not, I mean, the European Union is going to continue to show leadership, and I give them a huge amount of credit for doing that in an atmosphere which is incredibly negative and very difficult. I think Christiana Figueres is doing a fantastic job in trying to continue to promote low carbon solutions as the right way forward, as a way out of the economic downturn that we're seeing. But I think it's tough, and I'm still hopeful because I'm an opportunist, and I do believe that there's something that will come out, but I'm slightly skeptical as to what we will actually have.
Right, so it's up to us. Right?
I think it is. I think it's up to leadership. I think it's up to leadership at all levels. One of the things that we teach at Cambridge is that a leader is not necessarily a CEO, that a leader is people like you and I that are champions, that are working behind the scenes to try to make things happen. And if we can only get all of that energy together, I'm almost positive that we will make change. And we already are.
We are. Systems. And there's been a lot of talk about this year really being a tipping point year in the private sector around investment and just capabilities towards renewables and other areas of the sort of the climate agenda is so large.
Yeah.
But there are some bright spots out there. So
yeah. I think on the
hopefully
finance
we'll
side, what's
them.
really interesting is that we're going to set up a finance center at the Cambridge Program for Sustainability Leadership. I'm one of the leaders of that initiative. Just worked actually with Greg Barker, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change in the UK, as you know. We had a meeting with Eastern and Central European finance ministers to talk about how you actually scale up clean tech.
Yep.
Very interesting discussion about how the portfolios are too small in these areas and that there's not a lot of interest. So we now have actually are going to be working with the UK government and the Hungarian government to try to set up partnerships, both public-private, in order to ensure that we start to get investment in the right area so that we can start to scale up. And that will be doing a gap analysis of the market and really trying to get the right people together as well as investors.
Put the right pegs in the right holes.
Right, so bringing the sectors that are necessary and then the governments to really start to build this up. And that could be quite exciting. If we can then start in the Eastern and Central European region, we'll look at other regions as well, but also look at the systems aspect, as you said, in the process. You know, not just the money, but why is the money not getting to where it's going, and how can we build
how do we bridge the disconnect?
Exactly, and how do we actually bring down the barriers?
Yeah,
so that's
exactly.
quite exciting as well.
Good.